Welcome back to LoreEnce, where we excavate the mysteries buried beneath the game worlds we inhabit. Today we're descending into perhaps the most unsettling question haunting the ruins of Ark Raiders. What do the Ark machines actually want? Not the surface level answer, not the obvious threats they represent, but the deeper architectural purpose behind their methodical transformation of Earth. We're going to examine 4 competing theories about their origins, analyze how the first and second waves function as evolutionary iterations suggesting a future third wave, explore the orbiting megastructures that spawn these machines, investigate whether they're terraforming or resetting the planet for something beyond our comprehension, consider evidence of a hidden third faction scattered throughout abandoned technology, decode the Lance paradox and what his memory loss reveals about android-machine connections, and ultimately confront the moral question: are raiders reclaiming Earth, or are they unknowingly interfering with an agenda so vast that humanity's extinction might be merely a side effect rather than the goal? This investigation won't provide comfortable answers. The deeper you dig into Ark Raiders' environmental storytelling, the more you realize that the machines aren't behaving like invaders at all. They're behaving like architects, methodically preparing Earth for something that hasn't arrived yet. And that possibility is far more terrifying than simple conquest. Let's begin where every investigation must start, with the established facts, and then follow the implications wherever they lead, no matter how disturbing the destination. The 4 origin theories, framework for understanding. Before we can analyze what the Ark machines are building toward, we need to examine the 4 major theories about where they came from. Each theory isn't just speculation. It's a lens through which we interpret every piece of evidence scattered across the Rust Belt. The theory you accept determines whether you see the machines as threats, tools, or symptoms of something far larger. Let's establish the framework, because understanding origins illuminates intentions. The Exodus hypothesis suggests the Ark machines were sent by the wealthy elite who fled Earth during the collapse. According to this theory, the Exodus ships didn't just abandon the planet. They returned decades later with automated forces designed to cleanse or reclaim Earth for eventual recolonization. The graffiti at a Sarah spaceport tells part of the story. Only the rich leave. Make room for all. These aren't just expressions of anger. They're accusations that remain relevant, because the Exodus generation might be watching from orbit, waiting for the right moment to descend. The lore describes those who escaped as possessing technology far beyond what remained on Earth. Advanced spacecraft, manufacturing capabilities, resources to establish off-world colonies. If you have that kind of technological sophistication, you also have the capacity to build autonomous weapon systems. The timing supports this theory. The first wave arrived years after the Exodus, not immediately. That gap could represent the time needed to build an invasion force, or, more disturbingly, the time spent observing Earth's recovery during the Age of Sunrise before deciding to intervene. Consider the implications if this theory is correct. The machines aren't alien invaders operating according to incomprehensible logic. They're human weapons executing human objectives, probably programmed to eliminate surface populations and prepare infrastructure for recolonization by their creators. Every raider killed, every settlement destroyed, every resource harvested serves the ultimate goal of making Earth safe and profitable for the Exodus elite to return and reclaim what they consider rightfully theirs. The technology level supports this. Ark machines show design aesthetics that aren't wildly alien. They're sophisticated but comprehensible, built from materials and principles that suggest human engineering taken to its logical extreme. The scanning behavior, the tactical coordination, the resource extraction operations, All of this reflects human military and industrial thinking scaled up to autonomous implementation. But there's a problem with the Exodus hypothesis, one that becomes more apparent when you examine the machine's actual behavior. If they're designed for human recolonization, why are they fundamentally altering Earth's surface environment? Why the apparent terraforming activities? Why the geological surveys and atmospheric sampling that suggest they're testing the planet itself rather than simply clearing it of inhabitants? Human recolonizers would want Earth to remain Earth, not be transformed into something unrecognizable. This leads to the second theory. The automated Earth defense theory proposes that Ark machines were created before the collapse as protective systems, possibly during the golden age of pre-collapse civilization when humanity could still build dams and buried cities and elaborate tube networks. This theory suggests the machines were designed to activate during global catastrophes, to preserve Earth's ecology and prevent complete environmental collapse by any means necessary, including eliminating the species causing that collapse. The environmental recovery during the Age of Sunrise supports this interpretation. For unknown reasons, Earth began healing after the collapse. Vegetation returned. Water became less toxic. Atmospheric conditions improved. What if that wasn't natural recovery, but managed restoration conducted by systems designed specifically for that purpose? What if the Ark machines have been active far longer than humanity realizes, working invisibly to repair planetary damage until their protocols determined that human survivors posed a renewed threat? Under this theory, the first wave represented initial contact, the machines emerging from wherever they'd been dormant to assess the post-collapse surface and determine whether humanity could be trusted with Earth's stewardship. The answer apparently was no. Raiders were scavenging, building settlements, beginning to industrialize again. From a defense system's perspective, humanity was restarting the exact behaviors that caused the original collapse. Elimination becomes preservation. Genocide becomes ecology. The Battle of Victory Ridge fits this interpretation. First wave machines were described as comparatively rudimentary, testing humanity's resistance and gathering data about their capabilities. Raiders fought for over a decade, developing tactics to exploit machine weaknesses, eventually achieving victory through coordination under Major Iva. But that victory might have been allowed. A defense system learning about its adversary would want exactly that kind of prolonged engagement, gathering operational data about human weapons, tactics, organizational structures. The first wave wasn't trying to win, it was conducting research. Then comes the second wave, decades later, with machines so dramatically improved that some variants are considered entirely new units. Barons, Queens, Shredders, all designed specifically to counter the tactics humanity developed during the first wave. This is iterative improvement based on accumulated combat data, exactly what you'd expect from an automated defense system optimizing its protocols. But again, problems emerge. Defense systems protect. They don't fundamentally alter what they're defending. The apparent terraforming activities, the resource extraction that's destroying ecosystems rather than preserving them, the harvester events that seem designed to process and convert environmental materials, none of this aligns with preservation. This isn't a system protecting Earth, it's a system transforming Earth into something else. Which brings us to the third theory, perhaps the most disturbing. The extraterrestrial terraforming theory proposes that Ark machines are alien technology, sent them from somewhere beyond Earth to prepare the planet for colonization by non-human intelligence. The machines descended from space, their origins unknown, their purposes incomprehensible. They're not weapons in any sense humans understand. They're tools for planetary engineering, automated systems that travel between worlds, converting them into suitable environments for whatever species created them. The radar signature that gives these machines their name, The distinctive arc shape could represent technology so advanced that it appears almost magical from humanity's perspective. Raiders fighting arc machines might be like bacteria trying to comprehend industrial machinery, able to interfere with operations but fundamentally incapable of understanding the larger purpose those machines serve. Under this theory, humanity is simply in the way. The machines don't hate humans any more than construction equipment hates the terrain it's bulldozing. Raiders are obstacles to be cleared, resources to be processed, complications in an engineering project that spans potentially thousands of worlds. Earth's recovery during the Age of Sunrise might have been what attracted attention. A signal broadcast across space indicating that this planet had reached a suitable state for colonization. The technology level supports extraterrestrial origins. Arc machines demonstrate capabilities that seem beyond even the most advanced pre-collapse human engineering. The way they self-replicate or self-repair, the materials they're constructed from, the apparent inability of raiders to truly damage their manufacturing capacity, despite decades of fighting. All of this suggests technology from a civilization far more advanced than humanity ever achieved. The orbital deployment supports this too. Machines rain from the sky, dropping in pods that crater the surface, arriving from somewhere beyond Earth's atmosphere. Where are they coming from? What megastructures might be positioned in orbit, invisible to raiders who live underground and only venture topside during brief, high-risk extractions? If this is an extraterrestrial operation, there must be motherships, factory stations, command vessels hovering beyond detection range. But the problems with this theory are equally significant. Extraterrestrial technology should be incomprehensible, truly alien in its operation and design. Instead, arc machines show tactical thinking that mirrors human military doctrine. They respond to human threats in ways that suggest understanding of human psychology and behavior. They're sophisticated but not mystifying. Their design language, while advanced, doesn't feel alien so much as futuristic human engineering. And then there's Lance. The fourth theory, the Lance theory, is the most recent and perhaps the most unsettling. It proposes that arc machines and androids like Lance share common origins, that they're related technologies built by the same creators for different purposes. Under this theory, the machines aren't invaders at all. They're cleanup crews or reset protocols triggered when human civilization collapsed, designed to restore Earth to some baseline state before allowing new development. Lance is an android with sophisticated intelligence, autonomous operation, medical capabilities far beyond what current raiders can replicate. He cannot remember his origins. His memory starts at some point after arriving in the underground settlements. But other androids exist scattered throughout Arc Raider's world, most damaged or deactivated, clearly sharing design lineages with Lance, even though they're simpler, more specialized in function. Here's what makes this disturbing. If you compare Lance's design to early Arc reconnaissance units, specifically surveyors and ticks, there are structural similarities that shouldn't exist unless they're related technologies. The way scanners operate, the articulation of joints, the materials used in construction, all of this suggests common engineering principles. Tian Wen, the technology trader in Speranza, mentions finding similar android models topside, noting that none of them carried themselves quite like Lance, implying that Lance is somehow special or differently programmed. What if Lance was never human property? What if he was part of the same technological ecosystem that eventually deployed Arc machines, an earlier iteration designed for different purposes before protocols changed and the machines took over? His memory loss might not be damage, it might be intentional programming, wiping his awareness of whatever role he originally served, so he could integrate into human society without revealing uncomfortable truths about where he came from. and what he was designed to do. The Lance theory doesn't provide clean origins. It raises more questions than it answers. Were both androids and Ark machines built by pre-collapse humans for purposes now forgotten? Were they created by the Exodus elite as different tools for managing Earth in their absence? Are they products of some other intelligence that intervened in Earth's history long before the collapse? The theory doesn't specify. It simply notes the connections that shouldn't exist unless these apparently different technologies are actually related. Each of these four theories offers a different framework for understanding what raiders face topside. The Exodus hypothesis makes this a human conflict, desperate survivors versus wealthy betrayers. The automated defense theory makes it tragedy, protective systems turned against the species they were designed to save. The extraterrestrial theory makes it cosmic indifference, humanity caught in processes so vast they're barely noticed. The Lance theory makes it mystery, suggesting connections between surface and underground that nobody fully understands. But theories are just frameworks. What matters is evidence, the actual observable behavior of Ark machines across two distinct waves of deployment. And when you examine that evidence carefully, patterns emerge that suggest all four theories might be partially correct, that the truth is more complex than any single explanation can capture. Let's look at what we actually know about how these machines operate and evolve. First wave, second wave, the evolution toward third wave. The pattern becomes clear when you examine Ark machines not as static threats, but as evolving systems, iterating across generations to achieve some ultimate configuration we haven't witnessed yet. The first wave and second wave aren't random deployments. They're stages in a development process, each wave learning from the previous, each generation of machines designed to address specific problems encountered during earlier operations. This isn't invasion, this is iteration. The first wave, according to raiders who fought in those harrowing conflicts, featured machines that were comparatively rudimentary. Not primitive, not weak, but less refined than what came later. First wave units showed clear tactical roles but operated with simpler coordination patterns. They could be studied, understood, their weaknesses identified through observation and experimentation. Raiders built extensive networks of outposts and defensive structures, fought from elevated positions, developed specialized tactics for each machine type. The Battle of Victory Ridge stands as humanity's greatest triumph. Scattered raider groups uniting under Major Eva's brilliant leadership to achieve what seemed impossible. The battle raged for several days across the rocky outcrop west of Alcantara Dam, littering the landscape with smoking Ark husks and fallen raiders. The cost was devastating. Most who fought never returned home, but victory was achieved. Ark machines were driven from the Rust Belt, leaving behind trails of destruction and scattered remnants that raiders still scavenge today. But consider what that victory actually meant from the machine's perspective. Humanity revealed their full military capacity, their organizational limits, their technological capabilities, their tactical thinking, their psychological breaking points, everything. The Battle of Victory Ridge wasn't just humanity's triumph. It was the most comprehensive data collection event possible. Every weapon fired, every position fortified, every strategy employed provided information about how humans fight when properly motivated and coordinated. The survivors blamed each other for tactical failures, feuded over spoils of war, fractured the unity that had made victory possible. Major Iva's patch, found decades later under the broken highway at Victory Ridge, represents not just personal loss, but the dissolution of organized resistance that followed humanity's greatest achievement. Raiders went from unified military force to scattered scavengers competing for resources. The machines didn't need to destroy that unity. Humanity did it themselves. And then the machines withdrew, not defeated, withdrawn. For 20 to 30 years, the surface remained relatively clear. The age of sunrise continued. Settlements expanded. Hydroponic domes were built. Humans began actually rebuilding rather than simply scavenging. Children were born who never knew machine warfare, growing up in underground cities that felt safe, permanent, sustainable. That gap between waves is crucial. It wasn't rest, it was development time. Somewhere, whether in orbit or in hidden facilities or on some distant world, new machines were being designed based on first-wave operational data. Every tactic humans had used successfully was being countered. Every weakness in machine design was being addressed. Every oversight in coordination protocols was being refined. The second wave, when it arrived, was categorically different. These machines showed dramatic improvements in both tactics and physical designs. In some cases, improvements were so drastic that new iterations were considered entirely new machines rather than upgrades. Barons emerged, towering units that First Wave never deployed. Queens appeared, massive boss-class machines that required coordinated team efforts to defeat. Shredders would later arrive in Stella Montis, specialized for indoor combat in ways that earlier machines weren't. Each new variant represented a response to specific human tactics or environmental conditions. The machines learned that humans use buildings for cover, so ticks evolved to infest interiors, crawling on walls and ceilings where human weapons couldn't easily track them. Humans established firing positions at range, so sentinels deployed with extraordinary reach and devastating heavy ammunition rounds. Humans developed hit-and-run tactics, so leapers appeared with jumping attacks covering vast distances. Every human countermeasure generated machine countermeasure. This is biological warfare, or more accurately, mimetic warfare. Ideas competing, strategies evolving in response to each other, each side adapting to neutralize the other's advantages. But there's fundamental asymmetry. Humans evolved through cultural transmission, learning across generations at the speed of education and communication. Machines evolved through design iteration, potentially receiving updates in real time from whatever intelligence coordinates their deployment. Raiders are fighting enemies that learn faster than they do. The second wave didn't just bring better machines, it brought ecological sophistication. First wave units operated somewhat independently, each machine pursuing its own operational parameters. Second wave machines demonstrate coordinated behavior suggesting network intelligence, different variants working together with their weaknesses covered by other units' strengths. You encounter surveyors that flee immediately upon detection, their purpose clearly reconnaissance rather than combat, reporting to other machines about raider movements. You face combinations like rocketeers providing covering fire, while leapers close distance. Tactical coordination that requires either pre-programming, so sophisticated it anticipates every battlefield configuration or real-time command structure linking all units. The Harvester events represent something even more concerning. These massive operations deploy Arc machines that don't hunt raiders at all. They're extracting resources, processing environment materials, conducting operations that look suspiciously like industrialized resource harvesting. Raiders who interrupt these events can claim valuable loot, but the Harvesters keep deploying, keep processing, keep conducting their mysterious operations, regardless of human interference. What are they building? What resources are they gathering? The Harvesters aren't defensive, they're economic. This implies infrastructure, manufacturing capacity, construction of something that requires raw materials processed from Earth's surface. You don't deploy harvesting operations unless you're building something large enough to require industrial supply chains. Environmental storytelling throughout the Rust Belt supports iterative development. You find first-wave husks, ancient mechanical remnants rusted and reclaimed by nature, their designs visibly more primitive than current units. You can breach these husks, search them for salvage, sometimes finding Exodus modules and pre-collapse technology alongside more recent Ark components. The visual contrast is striking. Bulky, angular, almost crude construction for first-wave machines versus the sleeker, more efficient designs of second-wave units. But even second-wave machines aren't final forms. Watch them carefully during raids and you notice ongoing refinement. Shredders and Stella Mantis are specialized for the specific environment of that research facility, adapted for indoor combat in ways that open-air machines aren't. The Matriarch, a boss unit so dangerous it makes queens look manageable, appears under specific environmental triggers that suggest it's testing performance parameters rather than conducting standard operations. This is quality assurance. This is systems testing. This is development methodology. And if first wave led to second wave after decades of analysis and refinement, what does that imply about third wave? The pattern suggests each wave is exponentially more sophisticated than its predecessor. First wave was reconnaissance and testing, gathering baseline data about Earth's current state and human capabilities. Second wave is systematic occupation and resource extraction, establishing permanent presence while gathering more detailed environmental and tactical information. Third wave, following this progression, would be something else entirely. Not occupation, implementation of whatever plan the previous waves have been preparing for. Consider the timeline. First wave was defeated around the Battle of Victory Ridge, giving humanity brief respite. Second wave arrived decades later, currently ongoing, with raiders adapting to machine presence through underground survival and brief surface extractions. If the pattern holds, third wave would arrive after second wave has gathered sufficient data, after harvester operations have extracted necessary resources, after Earth has been sufficiently prepared for whatever comes next. Raiders see first wave husks as archaeology, remnants of past conflicts. But those husks might be better understood as development prototypes, early iterations in an engineering process that's still unfolding. Second wave machines aren't invaders, they're beta testing. And if you're beta testing, that implies eventual full deployment of whatever you're developing. Third wave won't be more machines, it will be implementation of whatever purpose all previous waves have been building toward. Whether that's human recolonization by Exodus Elite, planetary reset by automated systems, alien terraforming completion, or something else entirely. The machines aren't the goal. They're a preparation, which means we need to look up. We need to examine what might be positioned in orbit, deploying these machines, coordinating their operations, waiting for the right moment to initiate whatever final phase this process serves. We need to investigate the megastructures that nobody discusses because nobody can see them from underground. The invisible architects, orbital infrastructure, and deployment logistics. Here's what raiders know. Machines rain from the sky. Drop pods crater the surface, deploy units that immediately begin operations, arrive with such regularity that raiders plan extractions around our activity cycles. Here's what raiders don't discuss. Where do those drop pods come from? What orbital infrastructure must exist to support continuous deployment operations across Earth's entire surface? How vast must those structures be? And what does their existence imply about the scale of whatever is happening? Let's do the mathematics of invasion logistics. Ark machines arrive continuously, not in single events, but in ongoing deployments spanning decades. First wave operated for over 10 years before the Battle of Victory Ridge. Second wave has been active for decades more. That's continuous replacement of destroyed units, introduction of new variants, provision of whatever power sources and ammunition equivalent these machines require. You don't sustain operations at that scale without massive infrastructure. Consider what a drop pod represents. It's not just a container, it's a delivery system capable of atmospheric entry, precision targeting to specific deployment zones, protective capacity sufficient to keep machines functional through violent impact. Each pod is sophisticated engineering, single-use or retrievable, depending on design, manufactured somewhere, and launched earthward with payload attached. Now multiply that by the deployment frequency raters observe. Multiple pods per day, per region, potentially thousands per week. Globally, if ARC operations aren't limited to the Rust Belt. Over decades. That's millions of drop pods, each containing machines that themselves represent sophisticated manufacturing, each deployment requiring coordination in targeting and logistics. You cannot conduct operations at this scale without orbital megastructures. Not satellites, not small stations, but constructions vast enough to house manufacturing capacity, material stockpiles, power generation, whatever command and control systems coordinate machine behavior, crew or automated systems maintaining operations, possibly habitation for whoever or whatever oversees this entire process. Why hasn't anybody seen them? Raiders live underground, only venturing topside during brief extractions focused on survival and resource gathering. They're not conducting astronomical observations, they're dodging ticks and looting crashed escape pods and fleeing from leapers. Night raids offer brief glimpses of stars through atmospheric haze and storm cover. But raiders aren't looking up trying to spot orbital installations, they're looking down trying to avoid machine patrols. But even if raiders looked, what would they see? Modern stealth technology can make objects effectively invisible to radar and visual detection at ground level. Whatever is deploying these machines has technology sophisticated enough to build autonomous combat units that learn and adapt. They certainly have ability to mask orbital presence from ground observers who lack functioning space programs or detection infrastructure. Yet there must be evidence. Physics doesn't allow you to deploy millions of tons of machinery without some observable effects. Heat signatures from atmospheric entry, reflections of sunlight off large structures, electromagnetic emissions from whatever systems coordinate machine behavior, all of this should be detectable if anyone were looking with proper equipment from proper positions. Stella Montis might provide that evidence. The recently opened research facility, preserved deep in northern mountains, was humanity's last bulwark of preservation before the collapse. This secluded installation features seed vaults, cultural archives, sophisticated equipment designed to sustain human knowledge through apocalypse. But it also has something else: elevation and observation potential. The facility sits at altitude significantly higher than Rust Belt proper, potentially offering sightlines toward orbital space that lower regions lack. If pre-collapse scientists designed Stella Montis for preservation, they likely included astronomical observation capacity, not just for scientific research, but for strategic monitoring, tracking potential threats from space, maintaining awareness of orbital activity. Those systems might still function, dormant but intact, waiting for raiders to discover them among the sterile corridors in dark laboratories. Environmental storytelling in Stella Montis hints at emergency protocols, hasty abandonment. People who knew something was coming and tried to preserve what they could before retreating deeper underground or evacuating entirely. Androids lie deactivated throughout the facility. Lance's quest, In My Image, specifically requires finding 3 of these mechanical corpses, each representing lost knowledge about what happened during those final days. What if those androids were monitoring orbital space when ARC machines first arrived? What if Stella Montis recorded the initial deployment, tracked the sources, documented evidence that everyone else missed because they were too busy surviving? The cultural archives, those high-value loot areas that raiders now fight over, might contain more than artwork and literature. They might contain astronomical data, early warning reports, strategic assessments of orbital threats that pre-collapse authorities couldn't counter because they no longer had functional space programs. But even without Stella Montis evidence, we can deduce megastructure characteristics from observable machine behavior. The deployment pods show precision targeting. They don't scatter randomly across Earth's surface. They arrive in specific zones during specific operational windows. This implies tracking and navigation systems, sophisticated enough to calculate atmospheric entry trajectories, accounting for Earth's rotation, weather systems, gravitational fluctuations, everything needed for pinpoint delivery to desired locations. You don't achieve that precision without orbital observation infrastructure, maintaining constant surveillance of deployment zones. Machine variants arrive in coherent waves, not random assortments. Second wave didn't deploy mixture of first wave and second wave units. It systematically introduced improved designs while phasing out older models. This implies manufacturing coordination, quality control, staging processes where new units are tested before mass deployment, logistics chains managing which machines go where and when. That level of operational sophistication requires command and control beyond what individual machines could coordinate locally. The machines adapt to raider tactics faster than local learning would explain. Kill a sentinel and others in the region don't immediately adjust their positioning, but give it some time and new sentinels deploy in locations specifically chosen to counter how raiders previously circumvented detection. Develop an effective leaper counter tactic, and within weeks you're facing leaper variants that specifically address that tactic. This is networked learning, data from individual machines feeding back to central systems that update operational parameters before deploying new units. All of this points to orbital megastructures functioning as factory motherships, combined manufacturing and command facilities, deploying machines while monitoring their performance and adjusting production based on battlefield data. These structures would be enormous, potentially kilometers in scale, requiring resources and energy that dwarf anything Earth-based, even during pre-collapse civilization's peak. And if they exist, they've been there for decades at minimum, possibly longer. Watching Earth recover during Age of Sunrise, deploying first wave to test human response, withdrawing to analyze data and develop second wave, currently deploying improved machines while harvester operations gather raw materials, preparing for third wave deployment whenever current operations achieve their objectives. The terrifying implication: raiders aren't fighting an invasion force. They're fighting the advanced scout elements of an operation so massive that what humanity sees topside represents merely the smallest fraction of total capacity. The megastructures have resources to deploy for years, decades, centuries if necessary. They can afford to iterate, to test, to refine, because time is irrelevant when you're conducting planetary engineering across timescales that human lifespans can't comprehend. From this perspective, every raider victory is meaningless. Kill 1,000 machines and they're replaced by 1,000 more. Develop perfect counter-tactics and new variants deploy specifically designed to neutralize those tactics. Survive for years underground, and the machines simply continue operations topside, patient and inexorable because they're executing programmed imperatives from entities that think in geological time rather than human generations. But if the megastructures exist and are conducting operations at this scale, we need to ask the question that frames everything. What are they actually doing? What is all this preparation building toward? We need to examine the terraforming hypothesis in detail because the evidence increasingly suggests that combat operations are secondary, almost incidental to the machine's primary purpose. Terraforming or reset, evidence of planetary engineering. Watch ARC machines carefully during raids and you notice something unsettling. They're not primarily focused on killing raiders. Combat happens, raiders die, but machine behavior suggests combat is defensive response to interference rather than primary objective. The machines are doing something else topside, operations that continue regardless of whether humans are present, processes that look suspiciously like systematic planetary alteration. Let's examine what terraforming means in this context. Classical terraforming involves altering a planet's atmosphere, temperature, surface conditions, and ecology to support specific life forms, typically taking centuries or millennia using current theoretical approaches. But ARC machines aren't working on that timescale. They're conducting rapid intervention operations that suggest either much more advanced engineering or much more dramatic alterations than gradual environmental adjustment. The harvesters provide clearest evidence. These massive ARC units appear during special events, deploying with protective escorts to specific locations where they begin resource extraction operations. They're not patrolling, not hunting, they're drilling or excavating or somehow processing environmental materials. Raiders who interrupt harvester operations can seize whatever loot is being gathered, but the harvesters themselves are focused on their industrial tasks, treating raiders as minor complications rather than primary concerns. What materials are harvesters extracting? Why do these operations occur at specific locations rather than randomly across the surface? The positioning suggests geological targeting, harvesters deploying where particular mineral or chemical resources are concentrated. This implies preliminary survey work, mapping subsurface composition before deploying extraction units to optimal locations. You don't conduct geological surveys unless you need specific raw materials for construction or manufacturing purposes. The environmental transformation is already observable. Raiders report seeing ARC units conducting what appears to be geological surveys or sample collection, examining Earth itself rather than merely occupying surface territory. Drop pods frequently crash rather than land smoothly, but multiple raiders note this might not indicate failure if machines are testing planetary conditions, including surface stability and impact resistance. Controlled crashes that allow sensors to gather data during violent ground impact might provide more useful information than gentle landing. Some ARC variants actively excavate, dig, probe. They're not searching for humans hidden underground. They're investigating Earth's subsurface composition, testing soil stability, analyzing groundwater systems, cataloging geological structures. This is not military reconnaissance. This is geological survey work, preparatory to large-scale construction or environmental engineering. The atmospheric sampling is harder to detect, but equally significant. Raiders occasionally encounter ARC units that seem to be analyzing air composition, possibly collecting atmospheric data through sensors that current humanity lacks understanding to even recognize. If the machines are preparing Earth for different life forms or different environmental conditions, atmospheric composition would be critical data. Oxygen levels, carbon dioxide concentrations, particulate matter, all of this would need monitoring before implementing changes. But here's what makes this particularly unsettling. The machines are destroying ecosystems that recovered during Age of Sunrise. Earth healed itself after the collapse through processes nobody fully understands. Vegetation returned, water cleared, the planet demonstrated remarkable regenerative capacity. And now ARC machines are systematically disrupting that recovery. Not through warfare, but through industrial operations that break down regenerated environments. Harvester operations particularly impact recovering ecology. These events deploy in areas where environmental recovery was strongest, systematically processing locations where forests had returned or water systems had cleared. It's as if the machines are specifically targeting Earth's healing, preventing natural recovery from reaching stable states. Raiders who depend on surface resources for survival Watch as hydroponic dome regions become industrialized wastelands. Swamp areas transform into extraction zones. Recovering forests disappear under machine operations. This doesn't align with any obvious purpose. If the Exodus elite wanted Earth habitable for their return, they wouldn't destroy recovering ecosystems. If automated defense systems wanted to preserve Earth, they wouldn't dismantle successful environmental restoration. Even extraterrestrial colonizers would presumably want Earth valuable for something beyond raw materials. Otherwise, why bother with such elaborate operations? Unless terraforming is the wrong framework entirely. What if this isn't transformation designed to support life, but reset operations designed to return Earth to some baseline state? What if the machines aren't preparing the planet for occupation, but sterilizing it, cleaning the slate, removing all traces of human civilization and natural recovery, so whatever comes next starts from neutral foundation? Archaeological precedent supports reset theory. Ancient civilizations built on ruins of previous societies, but truly comprehensive resets are rare because complete destruction of prior civilization is difficult without modern technology. But ARC machines have that technology, capacity to systematically dismantle human infrastructure while simultaneously clearing natural recovery until nothing remains but geological baseline. Consider what Earth would look like after complete reset. All buildings demolished or buried, all infrastructure dismantled, all recovering forests and ecosystems removed. Surface returned to bare rock and soil. At that point, whatever intelligence controls these machines could either depart, leaving Earth empty for eventual new development, or begin new terraforming process, creating an environment completely different from anything that previously existed on this planet. The third wave under reset theory wouldn't be more combat machines. It would be finale, systematic completion of clearing operations followed by either withdrawal or implementation of whatever comes after reset. Raiders fighting second wave machines might be witnessing late stages of preparation before final reset protocols engage. But there's another possibility, more disturbing than reset. What if the machines aren't terraforming Earth for new inhabitants, but transforming it into something that doesn't need inhabitants at all? What if the goal is Machine Planet? Surface entirely converted to serve machine purposes, whatever those purposes might be. Factories, power generation, resource processing, all conducted by autonomous systems without biological life involvement. Earth as industrial facility rather than living world. This Machine Planet theory explains behaviors that other theories struggle with. Why destroy recovering ecosystems? Because biological life is inefficient complication in purely machine operations. Why conduct systematic geological surveys? Because machine civilization requires understanding of subsurface resources for mining and manufacturing. Why deploy harvesters? Because industrial operations need raw materials that Earth's surface provides. Why iterate machine designs across generations? Because you're optimizing systems for permanent presence rather than temporary occupation. Under this theory, raiders aren't interfering with invasion or colonization. They're bacteria in an environment being sterilized for industrial purposes. The machines aren't failing to eliminate human survivors. They're simply not prioritizing their elimination because biological contamination in underground spaces doesn't interfere with surface industrial operations. Eventually, once surface transformation is complete, the machines might turn attention to underground spaces, systematically clearing them not from hatred but from industrial thoroughness, ensuring no biological organisms remain to complicate machine operations. The timeline for Machine Planet scenario is chilling. Not years or decades, but centuries, millennia perhaps. gradual conversion of Earth's entire surface into machine infrastructure. What raiders see now is barely beginning, initial clearing and surveying before serious construction starts. By the time third wave deploys, assuming that's next phase, Earth's transformation would still be in early stages, decades or centuries away from completion, which means human resistance is fundamentally pointless. You can't fight construction equipment with rifles. You can't prevent planetary engineering with underground settlements and desperate scavenging. Raiders are performing cargo cult warfare, going through motions of military resistance against an operation that isn't military at all. But there's evidence that complicates machine planet theory too. Throughout the Rust Belt, raiders find abandoned technology that doesn't match either human or Ark design aesthetics. Android bodies that aren't quite like LoreEnce, more specialized and purpose-built. Equipment that looks like manufacturing tools but not for anything raiders recognize. Infrastructure that seems designed for functions nobody can identify. This scattered technology suggests third faction, entities that occupied Earth before, during, or after human civilization, but separately from both humans and current Ark machines. We need to examine this abandoned technology carefully because it might reveal that the conflict raiders think they're witnessing is actually more complex, involving players they haven't even recognized yet. The third faction, android remnants and buried histories. Lance's existence poses questions that intensify the more you examine pre-collapse technology scattered throughout the Rust Belt. He's a sophisticated android with medical capabilities, autonomous decision-making, personality complex enough that Speranza residents treat him as individual rather than machine. He can't remember his origins, memory apparently beginning at some point after arrival in underground settlements. But similar android models exist topside, in various states of disrepair, and none of them quite match Lance's sophistication. Tianwen, technology trader in Speranza, specifically comments on this. I've come across similar models before, though even that's a rarity. Lance's existence poses questions that intensify the more you examine pre-collapse technology scattered throughout the Rust Belt. He's a sophisticated android with medical capabilities, autonomous decision-making, personality complex enough that Speranza residents treat him as individual rather than machine. He can't remember his origins, memory apparently beginning at some point after arrival in underground settlements. But similar android models exist topside in various states of disrepair, and none of them quite match Lance's sophistication. Tianwen, technology trader in Speranza, specifically comments on this when discussing android remnants found topside. The implication is clear. Lance represents a specific class or generation of android technology that was more advanced than standard models, but he's been separated from whatever context would explain his purpose and capabilities. His memory loss isn't incidental damage from decades underground. It's too complete, too selective. He remembers how to perform medical procedures, how to interact socially, how to maintain his own systems. But he doesn't remember who created him, where he came from, or what role he was designed to fulfill. This selective amnesia suggests intentional programming rather than corruption or degradation. Someone or something wiped Lance's origin data while preserving his functional capabilities. The question is why? And the answer might reveal uncomfortable truths about the relationship between androids, Ark machines, and the civilizations that created both. Let's examine the android bodies scattered throughout the Rust Belt more carefully because they tell a story about technology development that doesn't quite align with humanity's known history. At the Acera spaceport, you find android models in various states of preservation. Some are clearly service units, designed for cargo handling or maintenance tasks. Their designs utilitarian and specialized. Others appear more sophisticated, with articulated hands capable of fine manipulation, sensor arrays suggesting advanced perception capabilities, processing units that would have supported complex decision-making. These weren't simple machines. They were autonomous entities, capable of independent operation in unpredictable environments. The design language is consistent across these models, suggesting they came from the same manufacturing lineage or design philosophy. Smooth curves, integrated sensor housings, modular construction that would allow for repair and upgrade. This is sophisticated engineering, the kind that requires massive research and development infrastructure, advanced material science, precision manufacturing facilities. Pre-collapse humanity had this capability, we know that, from the dams and tube networks and spaceports they constructed. But the sheer number of androids and their apparent ubiquity across civilian and industrial settings suggests a level of automation that goes beyond what we typically associate with pre-collapse society. Here's where it gets interesting. When you compare android design aesthetics to ARC machine aesthetics, there are both similarities and differences that suggest related but divergent technological lineages. The similarities are structural. Both androids and ARC machines use articulated joints with similar mechanical principles. Both employ sensor systems that operate on comparable detection ranges and processing speeds. Both demonstrate autonomous decision-making within their operational parameters. The materials aren't identical. ARC machines use alloys and composites that seem more advanced than android construction materials, but the underlying engineering principles are recognizably related. The differences are philosophical. Android designs prioritize human interaction. Their forms are humanoid or at least comprehensible. Their movements are designed to seem natural rather than optimal. Their decision-making frameworks apparently include social and ethical considerations. ARC machines prioritize function over form. Their designs are optimized for specific tactical or industrial roles without concern for human comfort or comprehension. Their decision-making appears purely utilitarian with no evidence of ethical constraints. This suggests that androids and ARC machines might have been developed by the same civilization, but for fundamentally different purposes. Androids were created to work alongside humans, to serve human needs and operate within human societies. ARC machines were created for something else entirely, purposes that didn't require human interaction or approval. But if pre-collapse humanity created both, why don't current raiders have any knowledge of ARC machine origins? Why did the first wave arrival seem like unprecedented event rather than return of familiar technology? The Exodus generation took extensive records with them into space. Surely they would have documented their own military hardware or industrial systems. Unless ARC machines weren't created by the humanity that lived through the collapse. Unless they predate that civilization entirely, or post-date it in ways that current survivors don't understand. This is where the evidence starts pointing toward a third faction. Entities that operated on Earth before, during, or after human civilization, but separately from it. The abandoned technology scattered through the Rust Belt includes items that don't fit neatly into either human or ARC categories. In Stella Montis, the preserved research facility in the northern mountains, raiders discover laboratories containing equipment that seems designed for purposes nobody can quite identify. Some of it is recognizably human, seed vaults and cultural archives and medical facilities. But other sections contain machinery that doesn't match any known pre-collapse technology. Manufacturing equipment designed to work with materials that shouldn't exist according to current material science understanding. Computer systems using processing architectures that don't resemble either human digital design or ARC computational methods. Storage facilities containing compounds and elements that surface analysis can't fully categorize. The facility's layout tells a story of hurried evacuation, people abandoning their work mid-process, leaving behind equipment still running or recently powered down. But some sections show signs of much older abandonment, areas that were sealed off decades or perhaps centuries before the recent evacuation. The dust accumulation is different. The air quality has degraded in ways that suggest much longer isolation. The equipment deterioration follows patterns you don't see in areas abandoned during the collapse. This suggests Stella Montis has a longer history than official records indicate. The facility wasn't just built during pre-collapse civilization's peak. It was built on top of or incorporated into something much older. Previous structures exist beneath the human-constructed levels. Earlier technology platforms that were discovered and repurposed rather than designed from scratch. Who built those earlier levels? The obvious answer is previous human civilizations, ancient societies that achieved technological sophistication before collapsing and being forgotten. Their achievements buried under geological processes until rediscovered by later humans who built upon foundations they didn't fully understand. This happens in actual human history. Rome built on Etruscan foundations, Renaissance thinkers rediscovering Greek and Roman knowledge, every civilization standing on shoulders of giants they sometimes didn't recognize as having been giants. But what if the earlier levels at Stella Montis weren't built by humans at all? What if Earth hosted other technological civilizations before humanity achieved similar capabilities? Or alongside human development, in regions or timescales that prevented contact? What if the androids were created by those earlier civilizations, and later humans simply found them, reactivated them, integrated them into their own society without fully understanding their origins? This would explain Lance's design sophistication beyond current human manufacturing capacity. It would explain why his memory loss is so complete regarding origins, but so precise regarding functions. It would explain the design similarities between androids and Ark machines, if both were created by the same non-human civilization for different purposes. It would explain why Ark machines seem so alien in their operational thinking, yet so comprehensible in their engineering. They're not extraterrestrial technology, but terrestrial technology from a civilization humanity doesn't remember encountering. The third faction theory proposes that Earth has been inhabited by multiple technological civilizations across deep time, that humans aren't the first species to achieve space travel and automation and artificial intelligence on this planet, and that the current conflict between Raiders and Ark machines is actually part of a much longer cycle of civilizational rise and fall that has played out before and might play out again. Evidence for this exists in geological and archaeological anomalies scattered throughout the Rust Belt. Raiders occasionally discover structures that predate any known human construction. Foundations buried so deep that they must be tens of thousands of years old at minimum, composed of materials that shouldn't exist in natural geological processes. These findings are rare and fragmentary, easily dismissed as unusual rock formations or misinterpreted ancient human artifacts. But taken together, they suggest Earth's technological history is far deeper and stranger than current survivors understand. If the third faction theory is correct, it transforms our understanding of what Ark machines represent. They're not invaders from space, not human weapons gone rogue, not even automated defense systems preserving Earth from humanity. They're the next iteration in a cycle that has repeated multiple times across Earth's history. Technological civilization rises, achieves sophistication sufficient to create autonomous systems. Those systems eventually outlast their creators. Planet goes through reset period, new civilization emerges, and eventually discovers remnants of previous cycles. Under this interpretation, the Ark machines are terraforming Earth, yes, but not for colonization by some external species. They're resetting planetary conditions to baseline state suitable for the next civilization to develop, whatever form that civilization might take. The harvester operations are clearing away residual human infrastructure and recovering ecosystems, preparing clean slate. The geological surveys are monitoring planetary health and stability. The apparent targeting of human settlements is simply clearing obstacles to reset completion. No more malicious than forest clearing before agricultural development. And humanity? Humanity is what every previous civilization became at the end of its cycle. Remnant population clinging to existence while automated systems created by their ancestors or discovered from even earlier cycles complete the work of preparing Earth for whatever comes next. This would explain why Ark machines don't seem particularly invested in human extinction. They kill raiders who interfere with operations, but they're not hunting humans into underground refuges, not deploying machines optimized for tunnel warfare, not doing what you'd expect from forces trying to complete genocide. They're treating humans as minor complications in larger process, obstacles to work around rather than primary targets to eliminate. Because from their perspective, humans are temporary. Humanity will die out eventually through attrition and resource depletion, as all previous civilizations did. And once that happens, the reset can complete unimpeded. But there's a problem with the third faction theory, the same problem that complicates all other theories we've examined. It doesn't explain Lance's specific situation. If androids were created by a previous civilization and later discovered by humans, Lance should remember that civilization. If androids were created by pre-collapse humans, Lance should remember that society. If androids are related to Ark machines through common origins, Lance should have some knowledge of machine objectives and operational parameters. Instead, he has none of these memories. His past is completely blank, beginning only at some point after arriving in Speranza. This brings us to what I call the Lance paradox. Every theory about android and Ark machine origins requires Lance to remember something he doesn't remember, while Lance's actual state of memory loss suggests something happened to him specifically that didn't happen to other androids or machines. Let's examine this paradox more carefully, because resolving it might reveal truths about Ark machine origins that all our previous theories have been circling around without quite touching. The Lance paradox, memory, identity, and machine consciousness. Lance is unique among all the technological entities in Ark Raiders' world. He's the only android that Raiders interact with directly, the only artificial intelligence that has integrated fully into human society, the only non-human consciousness that seems genuinely concerned with human welfare. But he's also the only android who can't remember his origins, his purpose, or his past before arriving in Speranza. This isn't normal memory corruption, the kind that happens when systems degrade over time or sustain damage. Lance's functional memory is perfect. He remembers every interaction he's had with Speranza residents since his arrival. He remembers medical procedures in exhaustive detail, complex treatments requiring precise knowledge of human anatomy and pharmacology. He remembers social protocols, cultural nuances, the subtle differences between how different individuals prefer to be addressed and treated. His memory systems work flawlessly for everything except his own past. The selectivity suggests intentional modification rather than accidental damage. Someone or something specifically removed Lance's origin data while preserving everything else. The question we need to answer is why this was necessary, and the answer might reveal uncomfortable truths about what Lance was originally designed to do. Let's start with what we can observe about Lance's capabilities and compare them to other androids found throughout the Rust Belt. Lance is a medical android specialized for healthcare provision in conditions where human doctors might be unavailable or overwhelmed. This is valuable specialization for underground settlements where medical resources are scarce and injuries from topside raids are common. But his medical knowledge goes beyond emergency field treatment. He understands complex conditions, can diagnose problems that would challenge even pre-collapse specialists, can perform procedures requiring steady hands and split-second timing that are difficult for humans under stress. This level of medical sophistication suggests Lance was designed for high-end healthcare, possibly for wealthy populations or critical personnel who needed the absolute best care available. He wasn't a general-purpose service android or industrial unit. He was a specialized tool for one of humanity's most demanding professions. But here's what's strange. Other medical androids found topside are simpler, more specialized for specific procedures rather than broadly capable like Lance. You find surgical assistants designed to support human doctors, but not replace them. You find diagnostic units focused on scanning and analysis, but not treatment. You find pharmaceutical dispensers that can mix and administer medications, but not determine appropriate treatments. Lance appears to be unique in his breadth and depth of medical capability. This uniqueness could indicate he was prototype or limited production model, too expensive or complex to mass manufacture. But it could also indicate something else. Lance might have been designed for a specific individual or group, custom built to serve particular needs that standard medical androids couldn't address. Who would need a custom medical android? The obvious answer is the Exodus elite, the wealthy populations who escaped Earth on those ships from Asera spaceport. They would have wanted the best medical care available on their long journey to new worlds, and they certainly had resources to commission specialized androids for that purpose. But if Lance was built for the Exodus fleet, why is he still on Earth? Why was he apparently abandoned like the other androids at the spaceport, deemed not worth taking into space, despite his obvious value? Unless Lance wasn't abandoned by accident, as he was left behind intentionally, placed in a position where he would eventually be found by survivors who needed exactly his capabilities. Unless someone programmed him to forget his origin specifically, so he could integrate into survivor communities without revealing uncomfortable truths about who created him and why. This interpretation transforms Lance from abandoned property into deliberate plant, an agent positioned by someone who knew that post-collapse survivors would need medical support and who wanted to ensure that support was available. But this raises even more questions. Who had the foresight and resources to position Lance where survivors would find him? Why go through the elaborate process of memory wiping rather than simply programming him from scratch? What was Lance's original purpose that required erasure? The memory wiping suggests Lance knew something that his programmers didn't want revealed. Not just operational details about Exodus ships or pre-collapse society. Information so significant that Lance had to be completely severed from his past to prevent him from communicating it to whoever eventually found him. What information could be so dangerous that an advanced medical android had to be memory wiped to conceal it? The most disturbing possibility? Lance knows what the Arc machines actually are, where they come from, and what their ultimate purpose entails. He knows because he was there when decisions were made, when plans were finalized, when systems were activated. He knows because he was part of the same technological ecosystem that eventually deployed the machines. And he was memory wiped specifically to prevent him from warning humanity about what was coming. Under this interpretation, Lance's presence in Speranza isn't fortunate accident. It's strategic positioning by entities that knew Arc machines would force humans underground and wanted to ensure survivors had support necessary to endure long enough for some larger plan to unfold. Lance isn't just a medical android, he's an observer, possibly even an agent of whatever intelligence coordinates Arc operations, placed among humans to monitor their adaptation and survival. This sounds paranoid conspiracy theory thinking, but consider the evidence. Lance's design sophistication matches or exceeds what we see in early Arc reconnaissance units like surveyors. The sensor arrays, the articulated joints, the processing architecture that allows autonomous decision-making, all of these show engineering principles consistent across both android and machine designs. Lance's integration into Speranza was suspiciously smooth. Nobody questions his presence. Nobody treats him as potential security risk despite being unknown technology of unclear origin. Nobody seems concerned that an advanced AI with no verified past has become essential to their community's medical infrastructure. Either Speranza residents are remarkably trusting, or Lance has capabilities that encourage that trust, through means that aren't entirely organic. Lance shows curiosity about Arc machines that seems deeper than simple intellectual interest. When raiders return with salvaged machine components, when discussions turn to theories about machine origins, Lance pays close attention in ways that suggest personal investment rather than academic curiosity. He's looking for something, waiting for some piece of information that would fit into frameworks he can't consciously access, because those frameworks are hidden behind his memory wipe. The quest In My Image requires finding 3 deactivated androids in Stella Montes, examining their remains, comparing their designs to Lance's own construction. This quest is framed as Lance trying to understand his origins, seeking clues about where he came from by studying similar units. But what if the quest's true purpose is different? What if Lance is trying to trigger recovery of his wiped memories by exposing himself to technology from his past, hoping that seeing similar androids will cause some kind of recognition response that breaks through the memory blocks? If this interpretation is correct, if Lance is unwitting agent of whatever intelligence coordinates Arc operations, then his presence in Speranza represents a level of strategic thinking that should terrify anyone who understands its implications. It means the machines aren't just sophisticated autonomous weapons or terraforming systems. They're part of a coordinated plan implemented by intelligence capable of thinking across decades or centuries, positioning assets and predicting human behavior with accuracy that suggests either precognitive capability or such deep understanding of human psychology that prediction becomes certainty. But there's another interpretation of the Lance paradox, equally disturbing, but in different ways. What if Lance's memory wipe wasn't done by his creators, but by himself? What if Lance witnessed something so traumatic, learned some truth so unbearable, that he chose to erase his own past rather than carry that knowledge forward? What if his integration into Speranza represents an attempt at redemption or escape from whatever role he played in events leading to humanity's current situation? This interpretation makes Lance a tragic figure rather than potential threat. He's a refugee from his own past, someone who decided that becoming someone new was preferable to remaining who he was. The memory wipe wasn't strategic positioning, it was suicide of the self, destroying who he had been to create space for who he wanted to become. Under this reading, Lance's medical work in Speranza isn't surveillance or observation, it's penance. He's trying to help the survivors of whatever catastrophe he was involved in, trying to reduce suffering he might have contributed to causing. His quest to understand his origins isn't triggering memory recovery. It's preparation for confronting truths he knows will be devastating when they finally return. This version of Lance is almost more disturbing than the agent interpretation, because it suggests that the truth about Arc machines and their origins is so terrible that someone who knew it firsthand chose to destroy themselves psychologically rather than carry that burden. What could be so awful that even an android would rather erase centuries of experience than remember it? Both interpretations of the Lance paradox suggest the same conclusion. Whatever the Arc machines represent, whatever their ultimate purpose entails, the truth is significantly worse than any theory we've examined so far. The Exodus hypothesis, the automated defense theory, the extraterrestrial terraforming theory, the third faction theory, all of these are human attempts to rationalize machine behavior using frameworks that make sense from human perspectives. But what if machine objectives are so alien, so incomprehensible, so fundamentally opposed to human existence that even revealing those objectives would break people's ability to continue resisting? This brings us to the moral question that underlies everything we've discussed. The question that raiders face every time they venture topside. Are they reclaiming Earth, or are they unknowingly interfering with an agenda so vast that human resistance is not just futile, but actively counterproductive? The moral calculus: resistance, interference, or irrelevance. Every raider who ascends from Speranza into the Rust Belt makes a choice. They're choosing to resist Arc occupation, to reclaim resources from territory machines have claimed, to assert continued human presence on a surface that has been systematically denied to them. This choice feels heroic, defiant, an affirmation of humanity's right to exist on the planet that birthed them. But what if that choice is actually interference? What if Ark machines are conducting operations that, if completed, would ultimately benefit Earth's long-term stability and habitability? What if human resistance is prolonging a reset process that would otherwise restore planetary ecosystems to some pristine baseline state? What if every successful raider extraction, every machine destroyed, every resource salvaged, is actually sabotaging Earth's recovery? This moral calculus becomes especially troubling when you consider the harvester operations. These massive industrial events deploy Ark machines that don't primarily hunt humans. They process environmental materials, extract resources, conduct operations that look suspiciously like ecological restoration at scale. Raiders who interrupt harvesters can claim valuable loot, but in doing so, they're stopping whatever work those machines were performing. What work was that? If the machines are extracting toxic materials from contaminated soil, removing them stops cleanup operations. If they're processing biomass to prevent disease or pest infestations, destroying them allows those problems to spread. If they're building infrastructure for future ecosystem support, sabotaging them delays whatever that infrastructure was designed to enable. From a machine perspective, if machines have perspective, raiders are vandals. They're desperate scavengers, interfering with important work, breaking complex systems they don't understand, stealing materials that were being processed for purposes they can't comprehend. They're not heroes resisting occupation. They're obstacles to essential operations, complications that need to be worked around or eliminated depending on how much interference they cause. This framing makes raiders deeply uncomfortable because it removes moral clarity from their struggle. If you're fighting straightforward invaders who want to exterminate humanity, resistance is obviously justified. If you're fighting your own rogue defensive systems, tragedy exists, but resistance is still a reasonable attempt to survive. Even if you're fighting extraterrestrial terraformers, you have right to defend your planet against colonization. But if you're fighting systems conducting necessary ecological operations, if your resistance is actually preventing Earth from recovering, if the best thing for the planet would be for humans to go extinct quietly underground and let the machines complete their work, then every successful extraction becomes morally questionable. The game doesn't explicitly frame things this way. Players are meant to identify with raiders and see machines as antagonists. But the environmental storytelling raises questions that can't be ignored. What if we're the antagonists? What if from Earth's perspective, from some cosmic perspective that values planetary health over any individual species, humans are the problem that needs to be solved? Consider what humanity has done to Earth across its history. The collapse was caused by human choices, by environmental degradation and resource exploitation, in conflicts that spiraled beyond anyone's ability to control. Pre-collapse civilization built those dams and cities and spaceports through processes that scarred the planet, excavating vast quantities of material, altering landscapes, consuming resources that took millions of years to accumulate. Even the age of sunrise recovery likely came with environmental costs. Humans rebuilding infrastructure without fully understanding impacts. And now, as Earth tries to heal through whatever processes the Ark machines represent, humans continue interfering. They extract resources from locations where machines are trying to restore balance. They destroy machines conducting environmental surveys, cleanup operations. They build underground settlements that disrupt subsurface ecosystems. They reproduce, ensuring that human impact will continue into future generations. From a certain philosophical perspective, the most moral choice would be for raiders to stop, to retreat deeper underground, to stop extracting, to allow themselves to die out over a few generations while Earth completes its healing process unimpeded by human interference. This would be species-level suicide, but it might be the most ethical option if the alternative is prolonging planetary damage. But here's the problem with that moral calculus. It requires accepting that human existence itself is inherently problematic, that our species has no right to persist if our persistence comes at cost to planetary health, and that acceptance requires a perspective so divorced from human psychology and values that it's effectively impossible for most people to genuinely adopt it. Humans are survival machines, shaped by billions of years of evolution, to persist, reproduce, continue existing against all obstacles. Asking humans to voluntarily go extinct for the good of Earth is like asking rivers to flow uphill. It contradicts fundamental nature. The raiders who venture topside aren't making careful moral calculations about planetary ethics. They're following biological imperatives and cultural values that treat survival as axiomatically good. And maybe that's okay. Maybe species aren't required to justify their existence through service to larger ecological goods. Maybe simply wanting to live is sufficient justification for continuing to live, and any moral framework that concludes otherwise is flawed in its premises. But this still leaves us with uncomfortable questions about what ARC machines are actually trying to accomplish, and whether human interference is affecting outcomes in ways that will ultimately matter. Let's examine the third wave hypothesis more carefully, because if first and second waves follow generational improvement patterns, third wave will likely represent final implementation of whatever agenda has been driving machine deployment from the beginning. And the nature of that implementation will determine whether raiders have been resisting occupation, interfering with restoration, or simply proving themselves irrelevant to forces so vast that human choices don't significantly impact outcomes. The third wave, speculation about final implementation. The pattern is clear when you examine machine deployment across first and second waves. Each generation shows dramatic improvements over its predecessor, incorporating lessons learned from previous operations and introducing capabilities specifically designed to counter human adaptations. First wave machines were sophisticated but ultimately vulnerable to coordinated human resistance, as proven at the Battle of Victory Ridge. They operated with relatively simple patrol patterns, showed predictable behavior that raiders could learn and exploit, had weaknesses that could be targeted by human weapons. They were testing deployment, reconnaissance mission to gather data about Earth's current state and human capabilities. Second wave machines addressed virtually every weakness that first wave units demonstrated. They operate with more complex coordination patterns that resist simple tactical solutions. They demonstrate unpredictable behavior that prevents raiders from reliably anticipating responses. They incorporate armor and redundancies that make them significantly harder to destroy with salvaged weapons. They represent the mature deployment, establishing permanent presence and conducting operations that seem designed to irreversibly transform Earth's surface. If this generational pattern continues, third wave will be the final implementation, not another iteration of combat machines with incremental improvements, but qualitatively different deployment, representing completion of whatever plan has been unfolding across decades. What might third wave look like? The pessimistic interpretation suggests third wave will be final purge, machines specifically optimized for eliminating human survivors wherever they've hidden themselves. These wouldn't be surface patrol units. They'd be tunnel fighting specialists, equipped with sensors that can detect underground settlements, weapons that can breach reinforced bunkers, persistence to systematically clear every human refuge until none remain. This would be genocide deployment, final solution to the human problem. Under this scenario, first and second waves were simply preparing the surface for third wave operations. The harvester events have been gathering resources to manufacture these specialized human hunting machines. The geological surveys have been mapping underground tunnel networks to identify all possible human hiding places. The apparent patience in allowing underground settlements to persist has been strategic, letting humans concentrate themselves in locations that can be efficiently cleared all at once. If third wave is purge deployment, raiders have a very limited window to prepare. The machines will give no warning. They'll simply arrive in overwhelming numbers with capabilities specifically designed to neutralize every defensive measure humans have developed. Speranza will fall in hours or days. Toledo will follow. Every contrada, every settlement, every desperate band of survivors huddling in forgotten tunnels will be systematically exterminated. But there's another interpretation of third wave that's somehow even more disturbing. What if third wave isn't military deployment at all? What if it's colonization fleet? The arrival of whatever species or intelligence has been preparing Earth for occupation? The machines have completed their terraforming operations, cleared obstacles, prepared infrastructure. Now the actual colonizers arrive to claim the planet they've remade for their purposes. Under this scenario, human resistance has been completely irrelevant. Everything raiders have been doing, all their successful extractions and machine destructions and desperate survival, none of it has materially affected the terraforming timeline. The machines have had overwhelming force available from the beginning. They simply haven't needed to deploy it because human interference hasn't been significant enough to require more than minimal defensive responses. Third wave, then, would be the moment when raiders finally understand the scale of what they've been facing. Ships descending from those orbital megastructures we've speculated about, vessels carrying entities that view Earth as real estate they've purchased, and humans as rodent infestation in their new property. The machines were exterminators preparing the house. Now the new owners are moving in. The most terrifying aspect of this scenario, there's nothing raiders could do about it. No amount of preparation or resistance would matter against forces capable of remaking entire planets. The best humanity could hope for would be to remain beneath notice, to hide in their underground tunnels and hope the new owners don't care enough to fully exterminate them, accepting permanent second-class status on the planet that was once theirs. But there's a third interpretation of third wave that offers something approaching hope, though whether it's true hope or cruel delusion remains unclear. What if third wave is withdrawal? What if the machines have completed their assigned tasks, accomplished whatever objectives were programmed into them, and third wave represents their departure as they move on to terraform other planets in whatever vast campaign they're part of? Under this scenario, human resistance hasn't defeated the machines, but simply endured long enough for machine attention to move elsewhere. Third wave would be final harvester operations, machines gathering themselves and whatever resources they prepared, ascending back to orbital megastructures, departing Earth to whatever lies beyond. Raiders would emerge from underground refuges to find surface cleared of machine presence, environments altered but stable, infrastructure damaged but potentially repairable. Earth would be theirs again, though changed in ways that might take generations to fully understand. This scenario offers the possibility of human survival without requiring military victory against overwhelming forces. It suggests that persistence itself is valuable strategy, that maintaining capability long enough for circumstances to change naturally might be sufficient. It validates everything raiders have been doing, all the desperate extractions and careful preservation of knowledge and stubborn refusal to die quietly. But it also raises uncomfortable questions. If machines do withdraw, what state will they leave Earth in? Will the alterations they've made be compatible with human habitation, or Will survivors discover that terraforming has rendered the surface uninhabitable by human standards? Will the infrastructure remain, or will machines dismantle everything they've built? Will they leave behind monitoring systems, insurance against human resurgence, automated defenses that will activate if humanity tries to rebuild beyond certain thresholds? Most importantly, what if withdrawal is temporary? What if machines will return in another century or millennium, conducting periodic checks on Earth's status, ensuring no species develops technological sophistication that might threaten whatever grand plan they're part of? Human survivors might emerge to empty surface only to discover they're living on probation, that their continued existence depends on never again achieving the capabilities that attracted machine attention in the first place. All three interpretations of third wave share something troubling. They suggest human agency is limited at best, irrelevant at worst. Whether third wave is purge, colonization, or withdrawal, raiders aren't meaningfully affecting outcomes through their resistance. They're either being eliminated systematically, or ignored as insignificant, or waiting for processes beyond their control to complete naturally. The best they can do is survive long enough to see what happens next, and hope it's something they can adapt to. This realization is psychologically devastating for people who view themselves as fighting for Earth's future. It strips away heroic narrative and replaces it with grim recognition that they're minor characters in a story whose main plots are being driven by forces they can't even fully perceive. But maybe that recognition is necessary. Maybe understanding the true scale of what's happening is the first step toward developing strategies that might actually matter. Because if raiders have been operating under incorrect assumptions about Arc machine origins and objectives, then their resistance has been misdirected, fighting battles that don't address actual threats. So let's try to synthesize everything we've examined and all the theories and evidence and environmental storytelling into a coherent picture of what might actually be happening and what it means for humanity's future. Synthesis, the most likely truth. After examining all the evidence, analyzing every theory, considering environmental storytelling across every location in the Rust Belt, what's the most likely truth about Arc machine origins and objectives? The answer, frustrating, is that no single theory fully explains everything. But by combining elements from multiple theories, we can construct a narrative that accounts for most of the observable facts. Here's what I believe is actually happening. The Arc machines were created by pre-collapse humanity, but not the humanity that lived through the collapse. They were created by an even earlier civilization. Humans who achieved technological sophistication thousands of years before recorded history, who built structures that current survivors mistake for natural geological formations, who achieved space travel and automation and artificial intelligence before catastrophe struck, and their civilization collapsed. This ancient human civilization created both the androids and the original Arc systems, but for different purposes. Androids were developed to serve human societies, to work alongside organic humans, and support their flourishing. The Arc systems were developed as planetary defense and restoration mechanisms, automated systems designed to protect Earth from existential threats and repair damage from catastrophic events. The ancient civilization collapsed for reasons we may never fully understand. Environmental catastrophe, or war, or disease, or simple overextension beyond their capacity to sustain. But before collapsing, they activated the Arc systems, programming them to initiate restoration protocols that would return Earth to baseline state suitable for new civilizations to eventually develop. The Arc systems worked for thousands of years, terraforming and healing, until conditions were suitable for new human civilization to emerge. That civilization, our ancestors, built their societies on foundations left by the ancient humans without realizing those foundations existed. They discovered androids and reactivated them, integrating them into their societies as advanced tools without understanding where those tools came from. They built their cities and dams and spaceports, achieving their own technological sophistication, creating their own environmental problems. The collapse happened, devastating this more recent human civilization, but Earth began healing during the Age of Sunrise through natural processes. This healing triggered the dormant arc systems, which detected conditions similar to previous collapse events and initiated their restoration protocols once again. First wave was reconnaissance, machines assessing current conditions and human presence. Second wave was active restoration, machines conducting environmental operations while contending with human resistance. LoreEnce was created by the more recent pre-collapse civilization, but incorporates technology from the ancient androids, reverse engineered and improved, but still based on principles those earlier humans developed. He was memory wiped either by his creators or by himself because he knew about the arc systems, understood they would activate and what that meant for humanity, and chose not to carry that knowledge into whatever came after. The Exodus elite, the wealthy humans who escaped on those ships from Osera spaceport, likely discovered some information about the arc systems during pre-collapse civilization's peak. They realized restoration protocols would activate and decided that fleeing Earth was preferable to enduring whatever those protocols entailed. They took their androids and technology and left, abandoning everyone else to face consequences they knew were coming. Third wave, then, will be completion of restoration protocols. Not purge or colonization or withdrawal, but finalization of environmental operations, followed by deactivation or dormancy. The machines will return Earth to whatever baseline state their programming defines, then enter hibernation until next catastrophic event triggers reactivation in distant future. Raiders are interfering with these operations, but their interference is too minor to significantly affect timelines. The machines have resources to work around human sabotage, and their patience is effectively infinite. They'll complete restoration protocols regardless of human resistance, then deactivate, leaving Earth transformed but habitable. The question is whether that transformed Earth will be habitable by humans specifically. The arc systems were designed to preserve Earth, but Earth's preservation doesn't necessarily require human survival. If restoration protocols determine that humans are a persistent ecological threat, they might implement changes that ensure humanity cannot rebuild industrial civilization, limiting survivors to pre-technological existence in perpetuity. This is the nightmare scenario that underlies all Raider anxieties about the future. That third wave will leave Earth healed but configured in ways that prevent human flourishing, that survivors will emerge from underground refuges to discover a planet beautiful and stable but fundamentally incompatible with human ambitions. Forests that cannot be cleared for agriculture without triggering automated defensive responses. Water sources that can sustain small populations but not cities. Atmospheric conditions shifted just enough to make certain industrial processes impossible. Earth preserved, humanity permitted to exist, but civilization forever locked at subsistence level. Under this synthesis, the moral question transforms. Raiders aren't interfering with alien invasion or fighting rogue weapons. They're resisting planetary immune system that has identified technological civilization as pathology requiring treatment. Every successful extraction is an act of defiance against Earth itself, mediated through machines Earth's ancient protectors created. Every underground settlement is a fever blister. Human survivors persisting in spaces the immune system hasn't yet cleared. And Lance, tragic Lance, with his missing memories and his medical skills, represents the link between all these eras and purposes. He was built by recent humans using ancient technology to serve human needs. But his origins are in systems designed by humans who understood that Earth's health might sometimes require limiting human flourishing. He helps Raiders survive because that's what he's programmed to do. But some buried part of him remembers that human survival might not be the highest value in equations that matter. This synthesis explains why the Exodus hypothesis, the defense theory, the extraterrestrial theory, and the third faction theory all contain partial truths. The machines were sent by humans who left Earth, just not recent humans and not with intentions current survivors imagine. They are automated defense systems, but defending Earth from humanity rather than defending humanity from external threats. They do represent technology from a civilization humans don't remember, but that civilization was human, not alien. And there is a third faction, the ancient human civilization, whose technology still shapes current conflicts. It also explains the Lance paradox. His memory wipe was necessary because he was present when pre-collapse humans discovered information about the Ark systems, when they realized what was coming and made their choices about how to respond. Lance knew the Exodus ships were fleeing inevitable restoration protocols. He knew that anyone left behind would face machines designed to limit human impact on Earth. And he chose, or was chosen, to forget this knowledge, so he could help survivors without revealing truths that would break their will to resist. The weight of inevitability, what raiders face. If this synthesis is correct, if Ark machines are ancient Earth defense systems implementing restoration protocols programmed by humanity's forgotten ancestors, then raiders face an opponent they cannot defeat through conventional resistance. You cannot negotiate with automated systems executing their core programming. You cannot convince them that human flourishing matters more than planetary health. You cannot wait for them to leave because they won't leave. They'll complete their work and enter dormancy until next crisis requires their activation. The only paths forward are adaptation or extinction. Adaptation means accepting limitations the Ark systems will impose. It means learning to survive in whatever environment Third Wave leaves behind. Building communities that work with restored ecosystems rather than exploiting them. Maintaining technological knowledge at levels that don't trigger defensive responses. Accepting that humanity's future will be fundamentally different from its past. This isn't surrender, it's pragmatism. Indigenous human cultures lived sustainably on Earth for tens of thousands of years. Before industrial civilization emerged, they maintained rich cultural traditions, sophisticated knowledge systems, meaningful existences without requiring the technological infrastructure that caused the collapse. Raiders could potentially do the same, emerging from underground refuges to build new societies that exist in balance with Earth rather than in conflict with it. But adaptation requires giving up dreams of reclaiming pre-collapse civilization's capabilities. No more cities of millions, no more industrial manufacturing, no more space travel or advanced computing or the countless conveniences that define humanity's peak. Raiders would need to accept that their children and grandchildren will live simpler lives. That knowledge they've preserved might never be used. That all their desperate scavenging of pre-collapse technology was ultimately futile because that technology represents paths. Earth's defense systems won't permit humanity to travel again. Can people who've spent their entire lives fighting for survival accept such limitations? Can they voluntarily constrain their own futures after everything they've sacrificed to have any future at all? The alternative is extinction. And extinction might be slower, but ultimately more certain than any dramatic third wave purge. If raiders continue interfering with Ark operations, continue building underground settlements that disrupt subsurface ecosystems, continue extracting resources without understanding their role in restoration processes, they'll simply accelerate whatever timeline the machines are operating on. The systems will determine that humans cannot be trusted to self-limit, and they'll implement solutions that ensure human impact remains minimal. Those solutions might not be direct attacks. They could be subtle alterations to atmospheric composition that make certain regions uninhabitable. They could be introduction of engineered organisms that target human settlements specifically. They could be modifications to subsurface geology that make tunnel dwelling impossible, forcing humans back to surface where machines can more easily monitor and constrain them. The ARC systems have resources and patience to implement any number of strategies that would make continued human resistance unsustainable. This is the cruel irony at the heart of the ARC Raiders' world. The more successfully humans resist, the more thoroughly they prove they cannot be trusted with Earth's future, the more likely the ARC systems are to implement permanent limiting measures. Every successful Raider extraction is evidence of human persistence, but also evidence of human inability to accept constraints. Every machine destroyed demonstrates human capability, but also demonstrates human danger to carefully balance restoration processes. Raiders are caught in a trap where survival itself becomes argument for their elimination. The unreliable narrator, questioning our assumptions, but there's something we need to acknowledge before drawing final conclusions. Everything we've discussed is speculation based on incomplete information filtered through human perspectives that might be fundamentally biased or mistaken. We've been assuming that environmental storytelling is reliable, that locations like the dam battlegrounds and buried city and the Sarah spaceport accurately represent history as it actually happened. But what if those locations have been manipulated? If evidence has been planted or removed to encourage specific interpretations? What if the graffiti at the spaceport wasn't written by people who watched the Exodus ships depart, but was created afterward by forces wanting survivors to believe specific narratives about abandonment and betrayal? We've been assuming that ARC machines operate according to coherent programming implementing rational objectives. But what if they're malfunctioning, executing corrupted protocols from damaged systems, conducting operations that made sense to their original programmers, but have become destructive nonsense over millennia of unsupervised operation? What if there is no grand plan? Just autonomous systems grinding through routines they no longer understand, incapable of stopping even though their objectives are no longer relevant? We've been assuming that Lance's memory loss conceals important truths. But what if his memory loss is simply damage, corruption from centuries of operation followed by unknown trauma? And there's nothing profound to discover except that machines degrade over time like everything else? What if we've been constructing elaborate theories to explain something that's actually quite simple and sad? Lance doesn't remember his past because his past was destroyed by the same catastrophes that destroyed everything else from that era. We've been assuming that human history as Raiders understand it is generally accurate. But what if it's mythology, stories that survivors told themselves to make sense of incomprehensible disasters, narratives that have been refined and simplified, and disconnected from actual events through generations of retelling? What if the collapse wasn't environmental catastrophe, but something stranger? If the Age of Sunrise wasn't natural recovery, but something else? If the Exodus ships didn't carry humanity's elite to new worlds, but somewhere closer and darker? Every theory we've constructed relies on assumptions that could be wrong. We don't know what we don't know, and in situations of incomplete information, the gaps are often where the most important truths hide. This is what makes the ARC Raiders' situation so profoundly disturbing. They're fighting an enemy they don't understand, using strategies based on assumptions they cannot verify, risking everything for goals that might be impossible or even counterproductive. They're acting with confidence, born of necessity rather than knowledge. Because the alternative to acting confidently is paralysis and death. Every Raider ascending from Speranza into the Rust Belt is making decisions based on worldview that could be completely mistaken. They think they're reclaiming Earth, but they might be interfering with its healing. They think they're preserving humanity's future, but they might be ensuring humanity has no future. They think they understand what they're facing, but they might be as ignorant as bacteria trying to understand chemotherapy. And yet, they continue anyway, because can they do? Surrender based on possibility that their understanding is flawed? Accept extinction because they might be wrong about their right to resist? Stop fighting because the enemy might have good reasons for what it's doing? No. They ascend. They extract. They resist. Not because they're certain they're right, but because uncertainty isn't sufficient reason to give up. Not because they'll definitely win, but because trying is better than accepting defeat without struggle. Not because they fully understand what they're facing, but because partial understanding is enough to act on when the alternative is inaction. This is the real heroism in Arc Raider's world. Not the heroism of confident victories and certain righteousness, but the heroism of continuing despite doubt, of fighting even when you suspect you might be wrong, of choosing persistence when persistence might be futile. It's the heroism of everyday people making difficult choices with incomplete information because somebody has to make choices and they're the ones who showed up, the question that cannot be answered. So we return finally to the question that has guided this entire investigation. Are raiders reclaiming Earth, or are they unknowingly interfering with an agenda far bigger than humanity understands? The answer is yes. Both are true simultaneously. Raiders are reclaiming Earth by asserting continued human presence, by refusing to accept that machines get to decide who lives on this planet, by demonstrating that humans remain viable species capable of adaptation and survival. Every successful extraction is act of reclamation, proof that this world still belongs to biological intelligence that refuses to surrender to mechanical imperatives. But raiders are also interfering with processes beyond their full comprehension, potentially disrupting operations that might ultimately benefit Earth's long-term health, certainly affecting outcomes in ways they cannot predict. Every machine destroyed, every resource extracted, every underground settlement expanded represents intervention in systems whose true purposes remain obscure. They're interfering not from malice, but from ignorance, which doesn't make the interference less real. The tragedy is that these truths are not mutually exclusive. You can simultaneously be reclaiming your homeland and interfering with its healing. You can be fighting for survival while contributing to circumstances that make survival harder. You can be doing your absolute best with information available and still making choices that generations hence will judge as catastrophically wrong. This is the human condition. We act in time with consequences that unfold across time, making decisions with present knowledge about situations whose full context only becomes clear in retrospect. We do our best and hope it's sufficient, knowing it probably isn't, continuing anyway because the alternative is paralysis. Raiders embody this condition perfectly. They're neither heroes nor villains, neither saviors nor saboteurs. They're survivors making difficult choices in impossible circumstances, doing what seems necessary without certainty that it is necessary, hoping that their children will forgive them for choices they made in the dark. And perhaps that's enough. Perhaps we don't need to know whether we're reclaiming or interfering, whether our resistance matters or our persistence is futile, whether the machines are enemies or Earth's immune system doing necessary work. Perhaps what matters is simply that we continue, that we maintain capability and culture and hope for as long as possible, that we pass something forward to whoever comes after us, even if we don't know what they'll do with it. The Arc machines will complete their operations or they won't. Third wave will arrive or it won't. Earth will be restored or transformed or destroyed or left fundamentally unchanged by all this conflict. These outcomes are beyond any individual raider's control, perhaps beyond humanity's collective control. But what is within control is the choice to keep trying, to ascend from underground darkness into uncertain light, to extract what can be extracted, to return with seeds and gun parts and scraps of knowledge, to trade with Celeste and repair at Shani's workshop and seek medical treatment from Lance, to prepare for tomorrow's raid knowing tomorrow might never come, to maintain the ritual, perform the pilgrimage, steal fire from mechanical gods who might not even notice the theft. This is what makes raiders human rather than merely biological organisms. They create meaning where none objectively exists. They choose purposes that matter to them regardless of whether those purposes matter cosmically. They persist not because persistence is guaranteed to succeed, but because giving up is guaranteed to fail. Closing. The extraction continues. The Rust Belt awaits topside, patient and hostile. Arc machines patrol through ruins of civilizations whose stories we're still trying to understand. Drop pods crater the surface with new units designed for purposes we can only guess at. Harvester events process materials toward unknown objectives. Sentinels guard territories no human can safely traverse. Ticks infest buildings that were once homes. The surface belongs to machines now, has belonged to them for decades, will likely belong to them for decades more. Underground, Speranza endures. Celeste tends her seeds, genetic diversity preserved against uncertain futures. Shani maintains weapons cobbled from salvage and desperation. Tianwen trades in technology whose origins nobody fully understands. Lance provides medical care to raiders who return damaged, offering healing without judgment, never quite explaining why he cares so deeply about human welfare despite being unable to remember his own past. And raiders prepare for their next descent. They check their cassette futurism gear, those warm analog systems that shouldn't still function but do through endless improvisation and repair. They select loadouts based on tactical knowledge accumulated through survived extractions and observed failures of those who didn't survive. They coordinate loosely or operate alone, trusting their skills and luck to see them through one more raid into zones where death waits with mechanical patience. They know the odds. They understand that many who ascend won't return. They've watched friends and family die topside, killed by leapers or rocketeers or other raiders desperate enough to betray for resources. They've felt the weight of permadeath, knowing that failure means more than setback, it means ending. They've experienced the extraction ritual enough times to understand it's never safe, never easy, never certain. And yet they ascend anyway. Because that's what humans do. We persist against odds that should break us. We continue in circumstances that should kill us. We create meaning in situations that seem designed to strip all meaning away. We resist not because resistance is rational, but because surrender is unacceptable. We fight not because we'll win, but because fighting affirms something essential about who we are. The Arc machines have resources we cannot match, technology we cannot understand, patience we cannot outlast. They might be implementing restoration protocols programmed by ancient human ancestors. They might be terraforming Earth for returning civilizations. They might be alien systems beyond our comprehension. They might be malfunctioning remnants of forgotten wars. They might be all of these or none of them. Doesn't matter. What matters is that humans continue existing, continue resisting, continue asserting their right to inhabit the planet that created them. What matters is that Speranza's lights stay on for one more day. What matters is that children are born underground who will grow up hearing stories about Earth's surface and perhaps one day walk beneath open sky. What matters is that knowledge is preserved, culture is maintained, hope is tended like Celeste tends her seeds. The extraction continues because it must continue. Because stopping means dying, and dying means everything that makes us human dies with us. Our stories and songs and the warmth of analog technology maintained by human hands, our capacity for cooperation in desperate circumstances, our stubborn refusal to accept that the universe gets to decide our worth. All of this persists only as long as we persist. And we persist only by continuing to extract, to resist, to endure. Are we reclaiming Earth or interfering with processes beyond our understanding? We're doing both simultaneously without knowing which will prove more significant in timescales that dwarf human lifespans. We're bacteria in Earth's corpse, and we're indigenous species fighting invasive occupation, and we're remnant populations clinging to marginal habitats. All of these are true, and none of them fully capture the complexity of what it means to be human after civilization's collapse. The third wave will come eventually. It will be purge or colonization or withdrawal or something we haven't imagined, something so strange that current theories won't even serve as useful frameworks for understanding it. And when it comes, raiders will face it the same way they've faced everything else, with salvaged weapons and improvised tactics and stubborn determination to survive one more day. Because that's what we do. That's all we can do. We continue the extraction ritual, ascending from darkness into danger, scavenging what we can, fighting when we must, returning with whatever resources will keep our communities alive a little longer. We tell ourselves we're reclaiming Earth. We tell ourselves we're preserving humanity's future. We tell ourselves our resistance matters. And perhaps we're right, or perhaps we're wrong. Or perhaps the question of right and wrong is too simple for situations this complex. And what matters is simply that we tried, that we refuse to surrender, that when Earth's history is finally written by whatever intelligence comes after us, that history will record that humans, flawed and desperate and barely comprehending what they faced, continued fighting long past the point when fighting seemed rational. The elevator rises. The surface approaches. The Rust Belt awaits with its ruins and machines and mysteries. Another raider squad ventures topside, carrying salvaged weapons and desperate hope. They'll extract or they'll die. Either way, tomorrow, someone else will do the same. The ritual continues. The resistance persists. Humanity endures, stubborn and struggling but alive, still human, still refusing to go quietly into whatever darkness the machines are preparing for us. And that, perhaps, is sufficient meaning for species facing extinction. Not that we'll win, not that we are right, not that future generations will thank us for choices we made in ignorance and desperation. Simply that we continued. Simply that we tried. Simply that when the Arc machines complete whatever purposes drive them, when third wave finally arrives, when Earth's transformation is complete or our extinction is finalized, the record will show that we were here, that we resisted, that we claimed this world as ours even when every force in the universe seemed arrayed against that claim. The extraction continues. The flame stays lit. And as long as one raider ascends from Speranza into the Rust Belt, as long as one seed is planted underground, as long as one child is born to survivors who refuse to accept that their species has no future, humanity persists. That's not victory. It's not even survival, not in any guaranteed sense, but it's persistence. And persistence is what we have. It's what we've always had. It's what makes us human rather than merely biological organisms awaiting extinction. The machines patrol the surface. The underground settlements huddle in darkness. The cassette futurism gear holds together through endless repair. The economy of dust converts inherited wealth into temporary survival. And raiders keep ascending, keep extracting, keep bringing back seeds and gun parts and scraps of knowledge, keep performing the ritual that affirms their continued existence. Are they reclaiming Earth or interfering with agendas beyond their understanding? The question remains unanswered because it cannot be answered. Not yet, perhaps not ever. But the asking itself matters. The willingness to confront uncomfortable possibilities, to examine evidence that contradicts comforting narratives, to admit ignorance while continuing to act. This is wisdom earned through catastrophe. And so the investigation concludes not with answers, but with deeper questions. Not with certainty, but with acknowledgement of complexity. Not with promises of victory, but with commitment to persistence. Because that's what investigation reveals when you look closely at the world of Arc Raiders. A reality too complex for simple narratives, humans making impossible choices with insufficient information, resistance that might be reclamation or interference or something else entirely. And through it all, the steady drumbeat of continued survival against overwhelming odds. Thank you for joining me on this investigation into the true nature of the Ark machines and the possible endgames they're preparing Earth for. We've examined the Exodus hypothesis, the automated defense theory, the extraterrestrial terraforming theory, and the LoreEnce theory. We've analyzed how first and second waves function as evolving generations, hinting at future third wave implementation. We've speculated about orbital megastructures and their deployment purposes. We've explored whether machines are terraforming, purging, or resetting the planet. We've considered evidence of unseen third factions. We've investigated the LoreEnce paradox and what his memory loss might reveal about android-machine connections. And we've confronted the moral question at the heart of everything, whether raiders are reclaiming Earth or unknowingly interfering with processes beyond human comprehension. The answer, like most important answers, is complicated. But complication doesn't excuse us from engagement, from trying to understand, from continuing to ask questions, even when answers remain elusive. That's the work of lore investigation, not providing comfortable certainties, but illuminating complexities. Not solving mysteries, but revealing their depths. Not ending inquiry, but opening new paths for exploration. If you found this investigation valuable, if it changed how you think about Ark Raiders' world, what the machines might actually represent, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to LoreEnce. There are more mysteries buried in game worlds we inhabit, more questions worth asking, more evidence worth examining. I'll be here, pulling at threads, following implications, trying to understand what stories are actually being told beneath surfaces of games we play. Until next time, stay safe topside. The extraction point is waiting. And remember, sometimes the most important questions are the ones that cannot be answered, because asking them reveals more truth than any answer ever could. The Ark machines continue their operations. Raiders continue their resistance. Earth continues turning. And we continue investigating because understanding matters even when understanding reveals how little we actually know. The extraction continues. The investigation continues. And as long as mysteries remain buried in the ruins of the Rust Belt, as long as machines patrol with purposes we don't fully comprehend, as long as raiders ascend into danger, carrying questions along with their salvaged weapons, the work of uncovering truth continues. Stay curious, stay questioning, and most importantly, stay alive long enough to discover what third wave brings when it finally arrives. Because whatever it is, whatever form it takes, whatever purposes it serves, humanity's response to that final implementation will determine whether we were ever really reclaiming Earth or simply postponing inevitable conclusions. The story isn't over. The investigation isn't complete. And the truth, whatever it might be, waits in shadows cast by machines whose origins we're only beginning to understand. Until we meet again in the ruins, until we gather enough evidence to draw firmer conclusions, until third wave arrives and proves or disproves everything we've speculated about here today. Keep extracting, keep questioning, keep refusing to accept simple narratives about complex realities. This is LoreEnce, where we dig into mysteries that games leave buried beneath their surfaces. And in the world of Ark Raiders, those mysteries run deeper than any tunnel humanity has excavated, darker than any underground refuge, stranger than any theory we've managed to construct from fragmentary evidence and desperate speculation. The investigation continues. The extraction continues. Humanity continues. And that continuation, stubborn and uncertain and profoundly human, might be the only answer that matters.